Today we're going to start to switch gears and begin to focus on some of the essential outcomes from the grade 8 course. So these outcomes would be similar to the outcomes that were identified when we were writing those MRLC quizzes throughout the year. And the way they're set up is they've been identified as the outcomes. You can think of like the concepts, the skills that grade 8 students need to be very confident with, very comfortable with in order to be best prepared for grade 9 math. So we're going to focus on what we have kind of determined as like the super important essential outcomes, and we'll see how many we can get through. All right, so let's begin our review of multiplying fractions. You will notice there's a 1 up here. So what I've done is I've actually broken the lesson up into two sections. So today we're going to look at whole numbers and proper fractions, and then the next lesson will be on improper fractions and mixed numbers and sort of putting them all together. As a reminder though, a whole number, okay, for example, it could be like the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So I listed a couple there. Whole numbers do not include negatives. Okay, if you had negatives, then that would actually be considered an integer. So all of ours will be positive. And then we're also going to look at proper fractions. You have the definition below under terms to know, but two quick examples, you could have 1/2, and you technically could have like -3/4, but for grade 8, we only focus on the positives. All right, so terms to know, proper fraction, as a reminder, it's called a proper fraction when your denominator is greater than the numerator, and it's going to have a value less than 1. So just to write down a couple more examples, like I have above, I could have 1/2. I could have a +3/4. I could have 5/7. And you'll notice, so my denominator, I'll highlight in yellow, right? There's a 2 here, 4, 7, versus my numerator, which is on top. Okay, you'll notice that all the yellow numbers are bigger than the green numbers. So all of my denominators, right, are greater than the numerators, which are your top numbers. And those would have values less than 1. So if you were to change these into decimals, like this is 0.5, that's 0.75, those have values that are less than 1. So that's good to know. If we had an improper fraction versus a proper fraction, so this one has where the denominator is less than the numerator. And because it's less than the numerator, it's actually going to have a value greater than 1. So for example, we could have 4/3. You could have like 22/7, I don't know, 123. And again, I'll connect it. So my denominator, that's always your bottom number, okay, for an improper fraction is actually less than the top, right? So 3 is less than 4, 7 is less than 22, and 23 is less than 100. And again, if you were to change these into decimals, you would find that their values would be greater than 1. Okay, so then the last little term that's really important that you know it, you understand what it means. We also talked about mixed numbers. So that's going to be a number made up of a whole number. Okay, so something like up here and a fraction. So for example, you could have 3 and 1/7. You could have like 5 and 5/6. Right? So today the focus on the review is whether or not if we have a proper fraction, improper fraction, or if it's a mixed number. The big thing is how do you multiply with fractions? All right, so if you remember in class, we would have talked about the fact that it's easiest to multiply your numerators. So you multiply your tops. So I'll add that. So that's your tops. You multiply the denominators. So you multiply your bottoms. And then the last thing you want to check is, can you simplify it? So if you have it in a fraction format, could you state it in lowest terms? I'll give an example here. If you had, for example, 4/8 and you thought that was your final answer, what you would check, you have a 4 on top and 8 in the bottom. Is there a number that divides evenly into both of them? The answer is yes. So this, I could actually divide the top by 4 to give me 1. And then remember, whatever you do to the top with a fraction, you have to balance out on the bottom. So I'd have to divide that by 4. So then I could say that, well, actually, if I got an answer 4/8, I could write it in lowest terms as 1/2. Example number 1. So we're going to start by looking at where you have a whole number and you're multiplying by a proper fraction. And then what you're going to notice is I've kind of worded the questions a little bit different each time, just so you're comfortable with different ways that a question can be asked and realizing that they're actually implying the same thing. So the way that question A is worded, it just tells you determine 2 times 3/5. Right? Now, what I like to do is I'm going to think about, well, the number 3 technically is like a 3/1. And then I'm timesing that by 2/5. Okay, well, according to my steps, I would multiply the numerators. So I'm going to go my top times my top. So we're going to get 3 times 2, which is 6. Sorry for the color change, trying to save you some time. And then I'm going to multiply my denominators, my bottoms. So I would go 1 times 5. So I would get 6/5. Now I'm going to check, can I simplify this in terms of reducing it possibly to lowest terms? Well, I have a 6 and a 5, so I can't actually reduce it down or simplify it down by any value. So I could leave my answer like this, okay, depending on what the question is asking. So that's actually being left as an improper fraction. So remind you, so that's improper. But we also talked about in this course that you could also then change that into a mixed number. So you could think about, well, how many 5s divide evenly into 6? And I know that that would be 1, right? 5 will divide into 6 one time. And then what are you left with? Well, that would be 5/5. So then I'm still left with 1/5. So depending on your preference, you could also state this as a mixed number. The practice sheet that you guys are going to work on will actually include both solutions. Okay, so this would be improper, and then you have your mixed number. Question B, what is 2/3 of 4? So you'll notice worded a little bit different. Okay, so good time to remind you, when you see the word of, okay, this is implying that it's multiplication. So you can really think of this as being 2/3 times 4. Okay, so again, I have this whole number, I have the proper fraction. Sometimes it's easier to think about, well, that's like 4/1. And then I know I'm going to go top times top. So that will give me 8 over bottom times bottom, which will give me 3. Okay, double check, could you simplify this down? This would be the improper fraction version. Or again, you could think about 3 will go into 8 2 times, right? So 3 times 2 is 6. So then you're left with 2 more. So that would be the same thing as saying you have 2 and 2/3. What I suggest you do now, all right, now that we finished example 1, push pause on the video, try question C and question D on your own, and then come back and then continue on with this review sheet. Okay, so I'll keep going, but again, what I'd like you guys to do is push pause, try these 2 questions on your own, and then unpause it and check if you got the right answer. Question C says calculate 4 times 3/7. So you will notice, again, it's worded a little bit different. Reason for that is I want you guys to understand and recognize that in math, there's often multiple ways to ask the exact same question. Right, so to start this question, I'm going to think of it as 4/1, right? That's what that really is representing, times 3/7. And again, top times top. So I would get 12. Oops. 12 over bottom times bottom, you would get 7. Okay, check if you can simplify that. Nothing divides into the top and the bottom, so I could leave this as my final answer or state it as a mixed number. So this would be 1 and 5/7. So hopefully you got that as your answer when you tried it on your own. And then question D just straight up says multiply 4/5 times 2. So a lot of students find it helpful, right? The 2 is 2 over 1. And I should point out, if you don't have to do this, that's totally fine. Okay, so you don't have to write the 1 there if you feel like you don't need to write it down. So top times top, and then we'll go bottom times bottom. Do this in one step this time. So 4 times 2, I will get 8. 5 times 1, I will get 5. And again, you can't simplify that down, but you could write it as a mixed number. This would be 1 and 3/5. All right, so that was practicing where you had a whole number times a proper fraction. And you'll notice it didn't matter. This one had the whole number first, proper fraction second. This one had the proper fraction first, whole number second. So second type I want to review with you today is where you actually have proper fraction times proper fraction. So reminder, proper fraction, the number on top, your numerator, is going to be less than the number on the bottom. So notice 2 is less than 3, 2 is less than 3. All right, and then we are going to apply the same steps. So determine 2/3 times 2/3. So I'm going to go top times top, and then I will go bottom times bottom. So 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9. So I'm going to check 4 and 9. This is even, this is odd. Nothing divides evenly into them, so this would actually be my final answer. All right, so you can't write that as a mixed number because the number on top is smaller than the number on the bottom. And then I find sometimes students want to then take their calculator, or they might actually know this as a decimal and write it as a decimal. But kind of a good rule of thumb is if the question is giving you if a question is giving you a fraction format to begin with, you want to leave your answer in fraction format unless it states otherwise. All right, question 2b. What is 4/5 times 3 over 2? So again, throwing a different format at you there. Don't forget this little dot, if you ever see that, just means multiplication. Okay, so we are just going to go 4/5 times 3 over 2. You don't have to rewrite that if you understand that the dot is another way to say multiplication. So top times top, bottom times bottom. You're going to get 4 times 3 is 12. 5 times 2 is 10. Okay, so I have 12 over 10. Now, this is an improper fraction, so I could write this as a mixed number if I wanted to, but what I would check before I even do that is, could you actually simplify this down? So I have a 12 and a 10. I could actually divide the top and bottom by 2. So I would write this as 6 over 5. And then again, if you wanted, you could state it as a mixed number. So that would be 1 and 1/5. All right, again, you'll notice the your turn. So what I suggest, pause the video, try these last 2 questions, and then unpause it and check whether or not you got the right answer. So question C has 1/3 times 2/6. So I will go top times top, and then I will go bottom times bottom. 1 times 2 will give me 2. 3 times 6 will give me 18. This ends up being a proper fraction. So I can't change that to a mixed number for sure, but I'm going to check, could I simplify that? So I realize that they're both even, so I could for sure divide them both by 2, and I could say my final answer is 1/9. And then very last one, multiply 3/8 times 5/6. So top times top, bottom times bottom. You'll get, sorry, that looks like a not equal to. You will get 15 over 48. All right, this is a proper fraction. The number on top is smaller than the number on the bottom, so I can't change that to a mixed number, but I'm going to think about, could I simplify it down? So I notice I can actually divide them both by 3. So I can divide 15 by 3, I will get 5. And if I divide 48 by 3, you would actually get 16. So I would want to say my final answer is 5/16. Okay, so you probably noticed as we went through these examples and you tried some on your own, it's very, very repetitive, right? Same thing, multiply the tops, multiply the bottoms, simplify if possible. But the reason for that is this, again, as mentioned, is a very, very, very important skill going into grade 9, and then continuing on into high school as well. And just in general, it's really good that you understand how to multiply fractions. All right, so I know it might seem repetitive at times, but it's just important that you practice it and keep your skills super sharp. So what I want you guys to do now is there's a worksheet. It's titled Multiplying Fractions. And what I would like you to do is you're going to try the questions. I would suggest maybe do a couple at a time and then check your solutions. Make sure you're on the right track. Okay. If you are getting stuck and you're not getting the right answers, please, please, please take a picture, fire it my way, and then I'll provide you some feedback and sort of help you figure out what might be going wrong. And then at the end, what I would like you guys to do is take a picture of your completed worksheet. And then on the worksheet, just include, so most of you are used to my like happy face, neutral face, right? So I'd have the bottom like happy face, neutral face, or like sad face. So if you could, when you take a picture of your worksheet to send to me, if you could just include one of these kind of little, I guess if you want to call them emojis, so one of these little diagrams to show me whether or not, yep, I'm okay with this, I got it, ready to move on, or not quite sure, might like some more practice, or nope, I don't know what happened, I need some extra help on this. All right, and then that can kind of help me gauge how to better support you guys, and more so on like an individual need as we move on through this review. All right, thanks. Have a nice day, guys.